The Colothi homeworld burned. Supreme Commander Vexeth stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the fire spread across the continent below. The orange glow of destruction painted beautiful patterns against the planet's dark side. 300 years of Colothi civilization reduced to ash in 17 days. He felt nothing. This was simply the natural order of things. The planetary governor has transmitted formal surrender documents, his aide announced. The Colothi hegemony no longer exists as a political entity. Vexeth nodded slowly. His scales caught the light from the burning world, giving his gray-green skin an almost golden shimmer. He was tall for a Vethrani, nearly 3 meters, with eyes the color of dried blood. Those eyes had watched 47 worlds fall. They had never seen defeat. "Process the survivors for labor allocation," he said. "The young ones can be trained. The old ones have limited usefulness." "Yes, Supreme Commander." Vexeth turned away from the viewport. The Colothi had been moderately advanced. They had possessed a fleet of nearly 600 vessels and a standing army of 12 million soldiers. They had believed themselves powerful. They had been wrong. The Vethrani Dominion did not negotiate. It did not compromise. It did not accept anything less than total submission. This philosophy had served them well for 3 centuries. Every species they encountered faced the same simple choice: kneel or die. Most chose to kneel. Those who chose death received it quickly and efficiently. War, Vexeth had always believed, was simply mathematics. You calculated force requirements, applied overwhelming pressure, and achieved inevitable results. Emotion had no place in the equation. Neither did mercy, his communicator chimed. The frequency indicated a priority message from the High Council on the Vethrani homeworld. Vexeth accepted the connection. The holographic image of First Counselor Drethax materialized before him. Drethax was ancient by Vethrani standards. His scales faded to pale gray, but his mind remained sharp. He had orchestrated the Dominion's expansion for over a century. "Supreme Commander," Drethax said, "I trust the Colothi matter is concluded." "It is, First Counselor. Planetary resistance has ceased. We are processing the population now, efficient as always." Drethax's thin lips curved slightly. "Among Vethrani, this passed for high praise. I have a new assignment for you." Vexeth straightened. "I am ready to serve the Dominion." "Our long-range scouts have completed their survey of the galactic rim," Drethax said. "They have identified a new species. They call themselves humans." The word meant nothing to Vexeth. He had encountered hundreds of species in his career. They all blurred together eventually. All of them were weak. All of them fell. "What do we know about them?" he asked. "Very little. They emerged from a single planet approximately 400 years ago. They now control 12 colony worlds in a region they call the Sol Sector. Their total fleet strength is estimated at 300 vessels." Vexeth processed this information. 12 worlds. 300 ships. By Vethrani standards, this was barely worth noticing. The Dominion controlled over 2,000 planets and fielded a combined fleet of 90,000 warships. "They are insignificant," he said. "They are unknown," Drethax corrected. "And the unknown must be brought under control. The High Council has decided that human space will be incorporated into the Dominion. You will lead the pacification fleet." "How many ships will I be allocated?" 800. Vexeth's eyes narrowed slightly. 800 ships to conquer a species with 300. It was excessive. Wildly so. A commander of lesser experience could accomplish this task with 200 vessels. "The Council wishes to send a message," Drethax explained, reading his expression. "Our expansion toward the galactic rim has been observed by other species. They must understand that distance from the Dominion provides no safety. When we come for them, we come with overwhelming force. I understand, First Counselor. One additional note, Drethak said. The humans have a reputation among the minor species of the Rim. They are considered unusual. Unusual how? I do not know. The reports are vague, conflicting. Some species describe them as peaceful traders. Others speak of them with something approaching fear. Given their limited military capacity, this seems irrational. All primitive species harbor irrational beliefs, Vexeth said. The humans will learn the truth of the universe soon enough. The strong rule. The weak serve. There is no other way. Drethak nodded. Depart when you are ready, Supreme Commander. The Council expects swift results. The hologram faded. Vexeth stood alone on the observation deck for a long moment. Below him, the Kolothi world continued to burn. In a few months, the fires would die. The survivors would be sorted into labor categories. The Kolothi language would be forbidden. Their culture would be erased. Within 2 generations, they would forget they had ever been anything but servants of the Dominion. This was the fate that awaited humanity. Vexeth felt no hatred toward these unknown creatures. Hatred implied emotional investment. He simply did not care about them. They were an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved, a line item in the Dominion's expansion budget. He activated his communicator. Captain Nexeth, set course for the Galactic Rim. We depart in 6 hours. Yes, Supreme Commander. May I ask our destination? A region called the Soul Sector. We are going to meet humanity. 3 weeks later, the Vethrani pacification fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of human-claimed space. 800 warships arranged in perfect formation. Each vessel bristled with weapons designed to crack planetary shields and reduce cities to rubble. The combined firepower could sterilize a dozen worlds in a single day. Vexeth reviewed the tactical display in his command center. Human space lay before him like a map waiting to be redrawn. 12 colony worlds, 300 defending ships. According to his calculations, the campaign would take approximately 2 weeks. Supreme Commander, his sensor officer reported, we have identified a strategic choke point. The humans call it the Kepler Passage. Explain. It is a narrow corridor of navigable space between 2 neutron stars. The gravitational and radiation conditions make travel outside the corridor impossible for any known drive technology. All traffic to the human core worlds must pass through this point. Vexeth studied the star chart. The Kepler Passage was a gift. Control that single point, and you controlled access to everything beyond it. The humans had chosen their territory poorly. Or perhaps they had no choice. Either way, their geography was their weakness. How long is the passage? He asked. Approximately 2 light hours. Wide enough for fleet operations, but narrow enough to prevent flanking maneuvers. The humans will defend it. Undoubtedly. Supreme Commander. Vexeth allowed himself a small smile. Good. He preferred when species resisted. Total annihilation was simpler than protracted occupation. If the humans concentrated their forces at the passage, he could destroy their entire military capacity in a single engagement. Set course for the Kepler Passage, he ordered. Battle formation. We will offer them the standard terms. The fleet moved as one. 800 ships cutting through the darkness of space toward the throat of human civilization. They had traveled this path many times before. Different sectors. Different species. Always the same result. As they approached the passage, Vexeth composed the message he would send to humanity. The words were ancient, unchanged in 300 years. Every species heard them. Every species understood them. Attention, human civilization. This is Supreme Commander Vexeth of the Vethrani Dominion. Your worlds now fall under Dominion authority. You have two choices. Surrender unconditionally and accept integration into the Dominion as a servant species, or resist and face complete annihilation. There will be no negotiation. There will be no compromise. You have 24 hours to respond. Choose wisely. He transmitted the message on all frequencies. Then he waited. Vex, OTH, expected the usual responses. Panicked pleas for mercy. Desperate attempts at negotiation. Perhaps angry defiance from leaders who did not yet understand their situation. He had heard it all before. The words varied, but the outcome never did. The response came in 18 hours. It was not what he expected. Single human ship emerged from the Kepler passage. It was small compared to Vethrani warships, unimpressive, almost pathetic. It broadcast a simple message requesting communication with the Vethrani commander. Vexeth accepted the connection. A human face appeared on his display. Female, by his understanding of their biology. Dark hair streaked with gray. Eyes that reminded him of deep space. Cold, empty, calculating. I am Admiral Helena Chun of the United Earth Defense Fleet, the human said. I speak for humanity. Then speak, Vexeth replied. Have you come to surrender? The human's expression did not change. No fear, no anger. Nothing at all. No, she said. I have come to deliver our response, which is, we decline your offer. All aspects of it. Vexeth waited for more. Threats, pleas, explanations. The human simply watched him with those empty eyes. You understand what this means, he said finally. We will destroy you. Your worlds. Your people. Everything you have built. You can try. We will succeed. Your 300 ships cannot stand against 800. This is simple mathematics. The human almost smiled. Almost. The expression never quite reached her eyes. Mathematics, she repeated. Admiral Helena Chen returned to her flagship, the UE's Defiance, with the calm of someone who had already accepted death. Her shuttle docked in the main hangar bay, and she walked through corridors filled with crew members who stopped and saluted as she passed. She saw the fear in their eyes. She also saw something else. Determination. Status report, she said, as she entered the bridge. Captain Marcus Webb, her second-in-command, turned from the tactical display. He was a tall man with skin the color of dark coffee and hands that never trembled. Chen had served with him for 15 years. She trusted him completely. All 42 ships are in position, he reported. The defensive grid is active. Minefield deployment is complete. We are as ready as we will ever be. Chun took her seat in the command chair. The main view screen showed the entrance to the Kepler passage. Beyond it, somewhere in the darkness, 800 Vethrani warships were approaching. The mathematics were simple, brutal, final. Did the Vethrani respond to your message? Webb asked. They did not understand it, Chun said. They think we are insane. Are we? Chun considered the question. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations. Navigation, weapons, sensors, communications, 37. People who would almost certainly die in the next 24 hours. They had volunteered for this mission. Every single one of them. No, she said finally. We are not insane. We are simply willing to pay a price they cannot imagine. She activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Every ship in her command would hear what she said next. Every crew member. Every officer. Every person who had chosen to stand in this place at this time. This is Admiral Chun, she began. In approximately 3 hours, the Vethrani fleet will enter the Kepler passage. They outnumber us nearly 20-1. By any reasonable military calculation, we should retreat. We should fall back to the core worlds and prepare for a prolonged defensive campaign. She paused. On the view screen, the stars were steady, indifferent. They had watched countless civilizations rise and fall. They would watch this moment too. We are not going to do that, Chun continued. We are going to stand here. We are going to fight here. Many of us are going to die here. And when it is over, the Vethrani will know something they have never known before. Her voice hardened. They will know the cost of fighting humanity. They have conquered worlds with ease because no one has ever made conquest difficult. We are going to make it difficult. We are going to make it painful. We are going to make them bleed for every meter they advance. She looked around her bridge. Every face was turned toward her, waiting. I will not lie to you. Reinforcements are 3 days away. We will not last 3 hours. But those 3 hours will change everything. The galaxy is watching. Species that have lived under Vethrani tyranny for centuries are watching. They need to see that the Dominion can be hurt. They need to see that someone is willing to stand. Chun stood from her chair. Today, we are that someone. Today, we hold the line. Today, we teach the Vethrani a lesson they will never forget. Not because we will win, but because we will make victory cost more than they ever imagined. She sat back down. All ships, prepare for combat. It has been an honor serving with you. She closed the channel. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Webb spoke. Admiral, may I speak freely? You always do, Marcus. I have served in the fleet for 23 years. I have never been more proud than I am right now. Chun nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. The next 3 hours passed in quiet preparation. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Shield generators were calibrated to maximum efficiency. Damage control teams stationed themselves throughout each ship. Medical bays prepared for casualties they knew would overwhelm them, and in the quiet moments, crew members wrote final letters to loved ones. They recorded messages for children they would never see grow up. They made peace with choices they had made and choices they would never have the chance to make. Chun used the time to review the tactical plan one final time. It was not complicated. Complicated plans failed when reality intervened. This plan was simple, brutal, effective. The Kepler passage was approximately 2 light hours long. At its narrowest point, it was only wide enough for perhaps 50 ships to travel side by side. The Vethrani would have to funnel their fleet through this choke point. Their numerical advantage would be reduced, not eliminated. Just reduced. Chun had positioned her ships at the narrowest section. The defensive grid created overlapping fields of fire. The minefield waited in the radiation shadows of the binary neutron stars, invisible to Vethrani sensors. Every advantage had been calculated. Every disadvantage had been accepted. Admiral, the sensor officer reported. Vethrani fleet is entering the passage. Chun looked at the tactical display. 800 red dots moving toward 42 blue ones. The image was almost beautiful in its simplicity. 2 forces. 1 outcome. Time to engagement? 17 minutes. Chun activated the fleet channel. All ships, this is the Admiral. Hold formation. Hold fire until my command. Let them come to us. The minutes passed like hours. On the display, the red dots grew closer. Chun could imagine the Vethrani commanders looking at her tiny fleet with contempt. 42 ships. What could 42 ships possibly do against the might of the Dominion? They were about to find out. Vethrani fleet is entering weapons range, Webb announced. They are accelerating. Attack formation. Chun watched the enemy approach. The lead Vethrani ships were massive. Each one was larger than any human vessel. Their weapon systems could crack planetary shields. Their hulls were armored against weapons that humanity had not yet invented. but they were not armored against what humanity had invented. "All ships," Chum said calmly. "Fire." 42 human warships unleashed everything they had. The first volley caught the Vethrani completely off guard. Human weapons had greater range than their intelligence had suggested. Greater accuracy. Greater power. The lead Vethrani ships staggered as concentrated fire tore through their shields. 12 Vethrani vessels died in the first 30 seconds. "Reload all batteries," Chun ordered. "Target the next wave." The second volley was just as devastating. Human ships moved with coordination that the Vethrani had never encountered. Each vessel knew exactly where its companions would fire. Overlapping attacks overwhelmed defensive systems. Concentrated strikes found weak points in armor. 15 more Vethrani ships fell. On the Eternal Dominion, Supreme Commander Vexeth watched in disbelief. "This is impossible," his tactical officer said. "Their weapons should not be this effective." "Clearly they are," Vexeth replied coldly. "Adjust our approach. All ships, increase power to forward shields. Return fire." The Vethrani fleet responded. Hundreds of weapons fired at once. The human defensive grid absorbed some of the damage. The rest found targets. Chun watched 3 of her ships die in seconds. Their reactors exploded. Their crews never had time to scream. "Close ranks," she ordered. "Maintain fire." The battle became a storm of light and death. Human ships weaved through Vethrani fire with maneuverability that seemed impossible for vessels of their size. They struck and retreated. They drew enemy fire away from damaged companions. They fought with a desperation that the Vethrani had never encountered. Because the Vethrani had never fought someone who was not afraid to die. 1 hour into the battle, Chun had lost 12 ships. The Vethrani had lost 53. The mathematics were changing. "Admiral," Webb reported, "the enemy is regrouping. They are preparing a concentrated assault." Chun nodded. She had expected this. The Vethrani would stop trying to push through gradually. They would gather their strength and hit her line with everything they had. It was the logical response. "All ships, fall back to secondary positions," she commanded. "Lead them into the minefield." The human fleet retreated. Not in panic. Not in disorder. In perfect coordination, every ship moving to a predetermined location. The Vethrani pursued, smelling victory. Their formation spread out as they tried to surround the retreating humans. They entered the minefield. The neutron stars that formed the Kepler passage generated intense radiation. This radiation created shadows in sensor coverage. Humanity had spent years mapping these shadows. They had placed thousands of mines in places the Vethrani could not detect. The mines activated. Explosions rippled through the Vethrani formation. Ships that had survived human weapons fire were torn apart by weapons they never saw coming. The tight corridor of the passage became a killing ground. Vethrani captains tried to navigate around the mines, but there was nowhere to go. The walls of the passage were lethal radiation. The only path was forward, through the fire. Vexeth stood on his bridge as damage reports flooded in. 62 ships lost to the minefield. Another 41 heavily damaged. His fleet was being destroyed by a force a fraction of its size. How is this possible? His aide asked. They are inferior. They should not be capable of this. Vexeth said nothing. He was beginning to understand something about humanity. They were not superior in technology. They were not superior in numbers. They were superior in something else. They were willing to pay any price for victory. On the Defiance, Chun watched the Vethrani fleet burn. Her own fleet had been reduced to 22 ships. Half her force was gone. But the Vethrani had lost nearly 200 vessels. The mathematics were changing faster than anyone had predicted. "Admiral," Webb said quietly, "we are winning." "No. Chun or the Doctrine of Thorns have been developed 40 years before the Vethrani arrived. Admiral." Chun remembered the day she first learned about it. She had been a young lieutenant, assigned to fleet intelligence. A commanding officer, a grim-faced woman named Admiral Yoshida, had called her into a classified briefing room and explained the truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. "We are small," Yoshida had said. "We will always be small. The powers that dominate this galaxy have been expanding for thousands of years. We have had 4 centuries. We will never match their fleets. We will never match their industrial capacity. If we fight them conventionally, we will lose." Young Lieutenant Chun had asked the obvious question. "Then how do we survive?" Yoshida had smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We make conquest cost more than it is worth. We build thorns into every system, every planet, every ship. When they come for us, they will win. But they will bleed. They will bleed so much that the next conquest will seem less attractive. And the conquest after that will seem less attractive still. Eventually, they will decide that we are too expensive to conquer. Not too strong, too expensive." The Doctrine of Thorns became the foundation of human military strategy. Every ship was designed to extract maximum cost from any enemy. Every defensive position was prepared with layers of traps and ambushes. Every human soldier was trained to fight, until death was the only option, and then to make death itself a weapon. Now, in the Kepler Passage, the doctrine was being tested for the first time. Against a real enemy. Chun watched the tactical display as the 4th hour of battle began. Her fleet had been reduced to 14 ships. The Vethrani had lost over 250. The exchange rate was devastating. For every human ship destroyed, the Vethrani lost more than 15. But 15 to 1 was not enough. Not when the enemy started with 800. "Admiral," Captain Webb reported, "the Vethrani are changing tactics. They are no longer advancing in waves. They are forming a single concentrated formation. They intend to push through us with overwhelming force." Chun nodded. She had expected this eventually. The Vethrani commander was learning. He was adapting. He was accepting losses he had never imagined in exchange for ending this battle quickly. "How many ships in their formation?" she asked. 412. "They are leaving the rest in reserve." 412 ships against 14. The mathematics were clear. This would be the end. "All ships," Chun announced. "Form defensive line. Prepare for final engagement." It has been an honor. The human fleet moved into position. 14 ships against 400. Each captain knew what was coming. Each crew had made their peace. On the bridge of the Defiance, Commander Webb stood beside Admiral Chun with quiet dignity. "The doctrine says we should make them pay for every meter," Webb said. "We have done that." "Yes," Chun agreed. "But the doctrine also says something else." "What?" "When you have nothing left to fight with, you become the weapon." The Vethrani formation accelerated. 400 ships bearing down on 14. The mathematics were overwhelming. The outcome was certain. Chun opened a channel to her fleet. "All vessels, switch to Protocol Omega. Confirm when ready." One by one, her ships acknowledged. Protocol Omega, the final option, the ultimate expression of the Doctrine of Thorns. "What is Protocol Omega?" The Vethrani sensor officer asked Supreme Commander Vexith. Vexith did not know, but he was about to learn. The first human ship to fall was the Use Resolute. Her captain, a young woman named Sarah Martinez, had served in the fleet for only 6 years. When Vethrani weapons tore through her shields and crippled her engines, she did not order evacuation. She did not surrender. She aimed her dying ship at the nearest Vethrani vessel and accelerated. The Resolute struck the Vethrani cruiser Dominance at 3% of light speed. Both ships ceased to exist. The explosion damaged 4 other Vethrani vessels nearby. The next ship to fall was the U.S. Courage. Same result. A dying human ship became a guided missile, claiming an enemy vessel in death. Then the U.S. Freedom, the U.S. Hope, the U.S. Determination. Each human ship, when mortally wounded, became a weapon. Each crew accepted death as the price of one more enemy killed. The Vethrani formation, designed to overwhelm the human defensive line, became a killing ground of a different kind. "They are insane," Vexus' tactical officer whispered. "No species fights like this. No species accepts death so readily." Vexus said nothing. He was watching the battle with new eyes. He was beginning to understand something fundamental about humanity. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to be remembered. And they were fighting to make conquest so painful that no one would ever try again. By the 6th hour of battle, Chen had 5 ships left. The Vethrani had lost over 320 vessels. More than 40% of their fleet had been destroyed by a force that should have been swept aside in minutes. The U.S. Defiance had taken heavy damage. Half her weapons were offline. Her shields were failing. Her hull had been breached in 12 places. But she was still fighting. She would fight until there was nothing left to fight with. "Admiral," Webb reported, "we are down to emergency power. Our main weapons are exhausted. We have perhaps 30 minutes of combat capability remaining." Chun looked at the tactical display. The Vethrani were regrouping again. They had 500 ships remaining. Enough to finish the job. Enough to push through the passage and continue toward Earth. But not enough to do it easily. Not anymore. How many ships did they start with? Chun asked. 800. How many have they lost? 303 confirmed destroyed. Another 47 too damaged to continue fighting. Chun did the mathematics. 350 ships lost. Against 42. An exchange rate of more than 8 to 1. The Vethrani had never experienced anything like this. No one had. "We have done what we came to do," she said quietly. "Admiral, the galaxy is watching this battle, Marcus. Every species under Vethrani domination is watching. They are seeing something they never thought possible. They are seeing the Vethrani bleed." She stood from her chair. Pain shot through her side where a piece of shrapnel had lodged during the last assault. She ignored it. "They will remember this day," she continued. "Long after we are gone, they will remember that 42 ships held the line against 800. They will remember that humanity did not surrender. They will remember that conquest can be made too expensive to pursue." The Vethrani fleet began moving again. Chun watched them come. 500 ships against 5. The end was minutes away. "All ships," she announced. "This is our final stand. When your weapons fail, use your engines. When your engines fail, use your hulls. Die standing. Die fighting. Die making them pay." The last 5 human ships faced the Vethrani advance. The U.S. Valor, the U.S. Justice, the U.S. Liberty, the U.S. Horizon, and the U.S. Defiance. They fired everything they had. The Vethrani returned fire. The Valor disappeared in a ball of light. Her crew never hesitated. They turned their dying ship toward the enemy and took 2 Vethrani vessels with them. The Justice followed minutes later. Then the Liberty. Then the Horizon. Only the Defiance remained. Chun stood on her crippled bridge as alarms screamed around her. Half her crew was dead. The other half was fighting fires and trying to keep the ship functional. Webb lay unconscious against the console, bleeding from a head wound. "All weapons offline," someone reported. Shields have failed. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 12. Chun looked at the view screen. The Vethrani fleet surrounded her. Hundreds of ships, battered and burning, but still capable of destroying one more enemy. She was alone. She had nothing left to fight with, except the ship itself. Navigation, she said calmly. Set collision course for the largest enemy vessel in range. Maximum acceleration. Admiral, that is the enemy flagship. I know. Do it. The Defiance turned toward the Eternal Dominion. Her damaged engines fired, pushing her forward on her final journey. Chun watched the enemy flagship grow larger on her screen. She could imagine Supreme Commander Vexith watching her approach. She wondered what he was thinking. Probably that she was insane. Maybe she was. But she would die as she had lived. Fighting. Standing. Making them pay. The distance closed. The Vethrani flagship opened fire, but the Defiance was too close now. Too fast. Too committed. Chun smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. For Earth, she whispered. The collision alarm began to sound, and then, suddenly, the Vethrani stopped firing. Chun blinked. The Defiance continued her death charge, but no weapons were tracking her. The enemy flagship was not attempting to evade. Something was happening. Admiral, a voice said. We are receiving a transmission from the Vethrani commander. Put it through. Supreme Commander Vexith appeared on the view screen. His scales were dull with exhaustion. His red eyes burned with something Chun had never seen in a Vethrani before. Respect. Admiral Chun, Vexith said. I am ordering my fleet to cease fire. Chen's hand hovered over the engine controls. One command would complete her final attack. Why? She asked. Because you have taught me something today. Supreme Commander Vexith stood alone in his private quarters aboard the Eternal Dominion. The ship was silent around him. His crew, shaken by what they had witnessed, had retreated to their stations and their thoughts. No one spoke unless necessary. No one celebrated the survival of their flagship. There was nothing to celebrate. Vexith stared at a holographic display floating before him. It showed the tactical summary of the battle. The numbers were simple, brutal, impossible. Vethrani losses: 353 ships destroyed. 47 ships too damaged to continue operations. Total effective casualties: 400 vessels. Human losses: 41 ships destroyed. One ship severely damaged but functional. He had started with 800 ships. He had lost half of them. Against 42 vessels. In 300 years of Vethrani conquest, no enemy had ever inflicted such losses. The Kolathi, with their 600 ships, had managed to destroy only 37 Vethrani vessels before their complete defeat. The Morthani, who had resisted for 8 years, had killed fewer than 242 human ships, had destroyed 418 hours. Vexith ran the mathematics again, and again, and again. Each time, the numbers remained the same. Each time, they made less sense. How? He whispered to the empty room. He had asked himself this question 1,000 times during the battle. He had watched human ships fight with coordination he had never encountered. He had watched them refuse to retreat when retreat was the only logical option. He had watched them turn their dying vessels into weapons, sacrificing themselves to kill just one more enemy. No species fought like that. No species valued victory over survival to such an extreme degree. It violated every principle of military logic that Vexith had learned in his career. And yet the results spoke for themselves. His communicator chimed. A priority message from the High Council. Vexith accepted the connection with a heavy heart. First Counselor Drethax appeared before him. The ancient Vethrani's eyes were cold. His voice was colder. Supreme Commander, explain. Vexith had prepared for this conversation. He had rehearsed what he would say. Now, facing the most powerful member of the Dominion, he found that his prepared words were meaningless. "I have failed, First Counselor," he said simply. "The humans have defeated me. You have not been defeated. You still possess 500 ships. The humans have won. I have lost 400 vessels to a force of 42. If I proceed into human space, I will face their main fleet. Over 1,000 ships, according to our intelligence. At current attrition rates, that engagement will cost me everything." Drithax was silent for a long moment. His expression did not change. "Explain these attrition rates," he said finally. Vexith told him. He described the human weapons that had proven more effective than expected. He described their coordination, their tactics, their willingness to sacrifice themselves. He described Protocol Omega, the doctrine that turned dying ships into guided missiles. When he finished, Drithax remained silent for several minutes. "You are telling me," the First Counselor said slowly, "that a species with 300 ships poses a genuine threat to the Dominion. I am telling you that this species does not fight like any we have encountered before. They do not fight to survive. They fight to make victory painful. They have built their entire military doctrine around the concept of mutual destruction. If we conquer them, they will make us pay for every world with rivers of blood. The Dominion has blood to spare. Do we?" Vexith asked. "The conquest of humanity will require, at minimum, 50,000 ships. It will take years, perhaps decades. It will consume resources that could be used elsewhere. And at the end, what will we have? 12 devastated worlds and a species that will never stop fighting." Drithax's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting that we abandon this campaign?" "I am suggesting that we reconsider its cost." The First Counselor was quiet again. Vexith understood what he was thinking. In 300 years, the Dominion had never retreated from a conquest. To do so now would signal weakness. It would encourage other subject species to resist. It would undermine everything the Dominion had built, but to continue would cost far more than Vexith had ever imagined. "There is another consideration," Vexith said carefully. "The galaxy is watching this battle. Every species under our control has heard what happened here. They have heard that 42 ships held the line against 800. They have heard that humanity made us bleed. And they are beginning to wonder if they could do the same." Drithax understood immediately. The Dominion controlled over 2,000 worlds. Each of those worlds had a population that had accepted Vithrani rule because resistance seemed impossible. If those populations began to believe that resistance was possible, what do you recommend? The First Counselor asked. Vexith had thought about this during the long hours after the battle. He had considered every option: military, political, strategic. Only one made sense. "We withdraw," he said. "We claim that the campaign was a reconnaissance mission. We tell the galaxy that humanity is not worth conquering. Too primitive, too poor, too far from our core territories. And the truth? The truth is that humanity has taught us something valuable. They have shown us that conquest can be made too expensive. If we are wise, we will learn from this lesson rather than fight against it." Drithax considered this. His expression remained unreadable. "And if humanity does not accept our withdrawal? If they pursue us? If they use their doctrine to encourage rebellion among our subjects? Then we will face a new kind of war," Vexith admitted. "But that war has already begun, First Counselor. It began the moment Admiral Chung refused to surrender. We cannot undo what has happened. We can only decide how to respond." The First Counselor was silent for a very long time. "Withdraw your fleet," he said finally. "Return to Dominion space. We will reconsider our approach to the galactic rim. Vexith bowed his head. As you command, First Counselor. The hologram faded. Vexith stood alone again. He had just done something no Vethrani commander had ever done. He had asked permission to retreat from a conquest. He had admitted that a primitive species had defeated him, but he had also done something else. He had learned. He activated his communicator one final time. Admiral Chun, this is Supreme Commander Vexith. Please respond. There was a long pause. Then the human's voice came through, tired but steady. I am here, Supreme Commander. I am withdrawing my fleet. We are leaving human space. Another pause. Longer this time. Why? Chun asked. Vexith thought about his answer carefully. He could lie. He could claim strategic necessity. He could pretend that this retreat was his choice rather than an admission of defeat. Instead, he told the truth. Because you have shown me that conquest is not mathematics, he said. It is not simply a matter of calculating force requirements and achieving inevitable results. Conquest requires a willingness from the conquered. It requires acceptance of defeat. He paused. Your species does not accept defeat. You would rather die fighting than live surrendering. This makes you unconquerable. Not because you are stronger than us, but because you are more expensive than us. Chun's voice was quiet when she replied. That was always the plan. I suspected as much. Your doctrine of thorns is brilliant in its simplicity. You knew you could never match our strength. So you made strength irrelevant. You made the only relevant factor the cost of victory. Will you tell the galaxy what happened here? Chun asked. No. I will tell them that humanity was not worth conquering. Too primitive. Too poor. Too far from our territories. They will believe me because they want to believe. Because the alternative is admitting that the Dominion can be stopped. But you will remember the truth. Yes, Admiral. I will remember. And I will wonder. Wonder what? Vexith looked at the tactical display one final time. 400 red dots that should still be alive. 400 ships that should still be flying. 400 crews that had died against a force they should have swept aside in minutes. I will wonder what else humanity is capable of, he said. I will wonder what happens when you apply the doctrine of thorns not just to defense, but to expansion. I will wonder what the galaxy will look like in 100 years if other species learn what you have learned. Perhaps you will find out, Chun said. Perhaps I will. Vexith terminated the connection. Aboard the Defiance. Admiral Chun sat in her command chair as the Vethrani fleet began to move. Not toward Earth. Away from it. 500 ships. The remnants of an invasion force that should have conquered humanity in weeks. Were retreating. Captain Webb, his head bandaged but his eyes clear, stood beside her. They are really leaving, he said. I cannot believe it. Believe it, Chun replied. We made them pay enough to matter. That was always the goal. But we won. Against impossible odds, we actually won. Chun shook her head slowly. We did not win, Marcus. We survived. That is not the same thing. 37 ships are gone. Nearly 4,000 crew members are dead. The Vethrani still control 2,000 worlds. They still have 90,000 ships. She watched the enemy fleet grow smaller on her view screen. But they know now. They know that conquest has a price. And they know that humanity will make them pay it. What happens next? Webb asked. Chun thought about the question. She thought about the species living under Vethrani rule. The Korlathi, the Morthani, dozens of others who had surrendered because they saw no alternative. What would they tell you after the Battle of Kepler Passage? The galaxy had changed, Admiral Helena Chun stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned UES Unity, watching a diplomatic shuttle dock with a Kalathi refugee station. The station was hidden in an asteroid field, far from any Vethrani patrol routes. It held 40,000 Kalathi survivors who had escaped the destruction of their homeworld decades ago. They were about to receive visitors. "The shuttle has docked," Captain Webb reported from beside her. "Ambassador Okonkwo is meeting with the Kalathi leadership now." Chum nodded. This was the 17th such meeting in the past year. 17 species who had lived under Vethrani tyranny had reached out to humanity. 17 peoples who had heard what happened at the Kepler Passage and had begun to wonder if freedom was possible. "What are we offering them?" Webb asked. "The same thing we offer everyone. Training, technology, the doctrine of thorns. Will they accept? Some will. Some will not. Fear is a powerful thing, Marcus. These species have lived under Vethrani rule for generations. They have learned to accept oppression as the natural order. Unlearning that takes time." She turned away from the viewport. "But more will come. Every month, more species contact us. Every month, the coalition grows. The Dominion's grip is weakening. In the years since the battle, humanity had not been idle. The United Earth Defense Fleet had expanded to over 2,000 ships. New colonies had been established in the Galactic Rim. Trade agreements had been signed with dozens of independent species who had never dared to deal with anyone the Dominion might consider an enemy, and the doctrine of thorns had spread out. It turned out that the concept was simple enough for any species to understand. You did not need to be stronger than your enemy. You only needed to make conquest more expensive than your enemy could afford. This could be achieved through technology, through tactics, through sheer willpower. The method mattered less than the principle. Make them pay. Make them bleed. Make victory cost more than it was worth. Species that had surrendered to the Dominion centuries ago began to remember what resistance looked like. Underground movements formed on occupied worlds. Sabotage increased. Collaboration decreased. The Vethrani found themselves fighting 1,000 small fires instead of conquering new territories. They were not losing. Not yet, but they were no longer winning so easily. Chum received a message notification. She read it quickly and allowed herself a small smile. "The Kalathi have agreed," she said. "They will join the coalition. How many ships can they contribute?" 12. They have been hiding them in deep space for decades, waiting for this moment. 12 ships is not much. 12 ships with the doctrine of thorns is more than 12 ships without it. And every species that joins makes the next species more likely to join. That is how revolutions work. Slowly at first, then all at once. She walked to the tactical display that dominated the center of the observation deck. It showed the current state of the galaxy. Vethrani territory was marked in red. Over 2,000 worlds. 90,000 ships. 3 centuries of conquest. But there were other colors now. Green dots represented coalition members. Blue dots represented species in negotiation. Yellow dots represented resistance movements on occupied worlds. The map was no longer solid red. It was beginning to fragment. Far away, in the heart of Vethrani space, Supreme Commander Vexeth studied this same map. He had been assigned to observe human space after the Battle of Kepler Passage. Officially, this was a minor posting, a way to keep an eye on a species that had proven unexpectedly troublesome. Unofficially, Vexeth knew that the High Council was afraid of him. He had seen something they had not seen. He had learned something they had not learned. And he had been right. The coalition now includes 32 species, his aide reported. Human diplomatic missions have been detected in 47 additional systems. Vexeth nodded. He had watched this development with grim fascination. The humans were not building an empire. They were building something more dangerous. They were building an idea. The idea that conquest could be resisted. What are the Council's orders? He asked. We are to continue observing. No offensive action is authorized. They are still hoping this will resolve itself. Yes, Supreme Commander. Vexeth almost laughed. The Council was paralyzed by fear. They had spent 300 years believing that resistance was impossible. Now they were discovering that their entire philosophy was built on sand. They did not know how to respond. He did. Connect me to the first counselor, he said. Drethax's hologram appeared moments later. The ancient Vethrani looked even older than he had a year ago. The stress of recent events had taken its toll. Supreme Commander, you have news? I have a recommendation, First Counselor. One that the Council will not want to hear. Speak. We must negotiate with humanity. Drethax's expression did not change, but Vexeth could see the tension in his scales. Negotiate? The Dominion does not negotiate. The Dominion has never faced an enemy like this before. We can destroy humanity militarily, but the cost will be enormous. And while we are bleeding in human space, our subject species will remember what they have forgotten. They will remember that resistance is possible. You suggest we show weakness? I suggest we show wisdom. The humans have already won this war, First Counselor. Not on the battlefield. In the minds of every species that has heard about the Kepler passage. We cannot undo that victory. We can only decide how to live with it. Drethax was silent for a long time. What would you propose? A treaty. Recognition of human sovereignty. Trade agreements. Perhaps even military cooperation in certain areas. The Council will never accept this. Then the Council will watch the Dominion crumble. Not tomorrow. Not next year. But eventually. The humans are patient. They have built their entire strategy around patience. They know that time is on their side. Drethax's hologram flickered. When he spoke again, his voice was very quiet. You admire them. Vexeth considered the accusation. A year ago, he would have rejected it instantly. The Vethrani did not admire inferior species. But the humans were not inferior. They were different. They had found a way to be strong without being powerful. They had found a way to win without fighting. I respect them, he said finally. That is not the same thing. Perhaps not. Drethax paused. I will present your recommendation to the Council. I do not expect them to accept it, but they should hear it nonetheless. The hologram faded. Vexeth turned back to the viewport. Somewhere beyond the stars, humanity was teaching the galaxy how to be free. Species that had knelt for centuries were beginning to stand. An empire built on conquest was facing something it had never encountered. An idea that could not be killed. He remembered his final conversation with Admiral Chen. He had wondered what would happen if humanity applied the doctrine of thorns to expansion. Now he knew. They had not expanded their territory. They had expanded their philosophy. They had given the galaxy something more valuable than weapons or technology. They had given it hope. And hope, Vexeth was discovering, was more powerful than any fleet. Back in human space, Admiral Chun received word that the Korlathi training program had begun. 12 ships, 40,000 refugees. A species that had been conquered and broken was learning how to fight again. Not to conquer. Never to conquer. Humanity had learned long ago that conquest created enemies. Instead, they taught defense, resistance, the art of being too expensive to rule. Do you think it will work? Webb asked. This coalition you are building? Chun watched the Korlathi station grow smaller as the Unity departed. In a few months, those 12 ships would be ready. They would join the coalition fleet. They would teach what they had learned to others. The mathematics were changing. I do not know if it will work, she admitted. The Dominion is still vastly more powerful than we are. They have resources we cannot match, ships we cannot build. They could crush us if they committed everything. Then why are they not? Because they have learned the same lesson we taught them at Kepler Passage. Victory has a cost, and some costs are too high to pay. She turned to face her old friend. That is the secret, Marcus. That is what the doctrine of thorns really teaches. You do not need to be stronger than your enemy. You do not need to defeat them in battle. You only need to convince them that the price of victory is higher than the prize. And if they decide to pay the price anyway? Chun smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she faced 800 Vethrani ships, with 42 of her own, cold, empty, determined. Then we make them regret it. We fight. We bleed them. We die standing rather than live kneeling. And when the smoke clears, whoever survives will remember what it cost. She looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vethrani were watching, waiting, trying to decide what to do about a species that had changed all the rules. They conquered worlds with ease, she said quietly. They believed that power was everything. They learned differently at the Kepler Passage. They learned that courage matters more than strength. That will matters more than weapons. That a single fleet, if it believes strongly enough, can hold the line against impossible odds. Webb nodded slowly. What?